Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, January 13th, and this week, a glitch gone wrong. City Council joins drivers, and Instacart pays up. LegalRideshare breaks it down. And of course, from LegalRideshare, I'm joined by co-founder and lead attorney Bryant Greening. Bryant, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jared. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. It's as we discussed last week, it's already off to a pretty wild start and a little bit of deja vu, so let's jump right into it. We're going to hit it off with Monday. A part-time Instacart shopper, and I preface part-time, has detailed the ups and downs of the job. Now, this is from a blog called Scary Mommy, and they added some conversation she had, and she says, quote, "I've learned a lot during the first few batches or trips. For instance, on my second attempt at grabbing groceries, I didn't stop to look at what was being ordered, nor did I consider that I should." She later explains that, she was actually quite sick, and she said, "Imagine my horror when that $18 batch of 24 items included 2 flats of water, multiple 12 packs of pop, and a giant jug of laundry detergent." And she says it gets worse. "I then had to go to a second floor condo." So I think what's interesting to point out here, and again, I preface part-time shopper because I understand Instacart shoppers already know this, and I hope if there's customers or clients or non-Instacart shoppers listening to this podcast, there's a lot more involved with Instacart gig workers than just going and collecting items. And we're just seeing that in a blog post. It's a lot of work.
It really is. And, one of the ways in which Legal Rideshare is different than a lot of the other firms out there is that we understand that. When we talk to drivers and Instacart workers and, anybody else in the gig economy, we're fully aware that this is hard labor in a lot of ways. And it really helps us when we're talking to the insurance companies about accident and injury claims. They may say, "Hey, your Instacart shopper, why couldn't they work when they had a sprain or strain in their neck?" Well, this is exactly why. We see time and time again that there's heavy lifting. If you're on the road a lot, there's a lot of twisting and turning. There's bumps that you're going over. There are a variety of ways in which you can be injured on the job, or an injury can keep you off the job. And that's what stuck out to me with this post is it's just preaching to the choir to us and to gig workers who work the jobs every day, just how demanding these gigs actually are.
Yeah, and it reminds me again of actually the situation that we broke during the pandemic with the tip baiting that was happening to Instacart drivers when we discovered that people were tipping really high and then pulling the tip away. It's insane, and that was during the height of the pandemic. Again, it just reminds you that, look, gig work is not easy. And just like you said, when insurance companies are attacking these people and saying, well, why do they need this money? And it's like, well, it's pretty obvious. And again, this woman was just doing this as a part-time kind of supplementing her income. It wasn't even a full-time gig. And she immediately saw, okay, this is a lot harder than it looks. And I just think that needed to be pointed out.
Yeah, I wish a lot of people knew that. People who use these apps as customers, whether it's rideshare or delivery or you name it, they just don't get what goes on the other side. So a little bit of respect and a little bit of empathy could go a long way to maybe creating a better environment for everybody.
Absolutely. All right, and as we head into Tuesday, I can't say that we didn't see this one coming. Tesla's self-driving feature caused a major accident in San Francisco, The Intercept reported. Quote, "Highway surveillance footage from Thanksgiving Day shows a Tesla Model S vehicle changing lanes and then abruptly braking in the far left lane of the San Fran Bay Bridge, which resulted in an 8-vehicle crash. The crash injured 9 people, including a 2-year-old child, and blocked traffic, obviously, for hours. The driver told the police that he had been using Tesla's new full self-driving feature. Before it kind of just went crazy, brakes activated and moved in the left lane. I think what's interesting about this is right before the crash, Tesla's CEO, Elon Musk, basically announced Tesla's full self-driving capability that's now available in North America. this is a major milestone, and it's rolled out to 285,000 people in the country. So perhaps irony, perhaps caution. I don't know, Brian. What do you think?
I think caution is the word. These self-driving cars are obviously the way of the future. I mean, we're eventually going to get there, but I think this accident shows that we're not there yet. And the fact that these companies like Tesla or Uber or you name it are putting self-driving cars on our roads without human oversight or substantial ability to correct the wrongs of the technology is really hazardous. And they're going to bear a big price. They're going to have to pay a big price when crashes like this occur. Companies have a responsibility to put safe vehicles on the roadway, and when the technology fails and people get hurt, they need to take responsibility. So I'm hopeful that Tesla will do that, and I'm hopeful that there will be corrections to the technology and legislation that goes through that requires safety before something like this happens again.
I also feel like there's just a missing portion of regulation as well, because I feel like, and this is your expertise, Brian, is the situation of who's at fault. If they can argue, Tesla is going to probably argue that, hey, the driver should have been aware. I mean, I could see in the future situations where certain areas of a highway are regulated full self-driving versus non-areas. Things like that might prevent these type of situations from happening. There's just so many unknowns. And what's scary to me, especially about Tesla, is Elon has voiced multiple times that he's really less interested in the idea of it being an EV and really only focused long-term on self-driving. And anyone who's following his stock is seeing this stock start to drop and other people get into the market. And now, he's basically saying his only leg up is going to be self-driving. So my concern is he's going to push it before it's ready.
And that's what we see with all the tech companies. Uber had the accident a couple of years ago. We now see one with Tesla. Everybody is racing to be first. And I do think that our legislators, I think that the government needs to get involved to regulate. I don't think that it's an appropriate course of action to put dangerous technology on the roads where it's already dangerous. These are fast-moving, heavy vehicles going high speeds. Things should be moving slowly to ensure safety. And when it comes to who's responsible, the companies should not be able to point the finger at others. They need to take responsibility when their technology fails.
Yeah, totally. And we've talked before. I'm sure this will get brought up again. I'm sure this issue will happen again. Let's head over to Wednesday. Again, no surprise here. Drivers continue to struggle to make ends meet. The New York Times reported a really interesting statistic here. They said, quote, Uber and Lyft drivers now earn less in fares and tips than taxi drivers, according to new data from the Taxi and Limousine Commission, which regulates both groups. So they broke it down. They said during the month of September, Uber and Lyft drivers earned an average total of about $5,046, which includes about $277 in tips. But while those in taxis earned $5,844 and $865 in tips. So they're making about $800 more plus $600 more in tips. They go on to say and go to tap a transportation consultant. And he basically said what we already know. He said the app services make money by charging passengers as much as they can and paying drivers as little as possible. And his exact words are, the point of the business is to squeeze both the driver and passenger as much as possible because that's how the companies make money. So Brian, nothing new here, but it's there for everyone to see. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, it's sad. It's a bit ironic that we're in this position now where taxis are outpacing rideshare in terms of wages. When it started, back in the 2010s, rideshare drivers were making a lot of money. The companies were promising them living wages, and drivers were making living wages. Slowly but surely, those wages continued to drop, and now we see where we are, where the industry that rideshare essentially killed is a better job. So Obviously, we would like to see changes made. We would like to see city councils step up, which we'll see later in the week, or later in our episode today, that one city council is doing that to ensure that drivers are protected. We'd like to see the companies guarantee some sort of minimum wage so that drivers know that they have a floor. And until that happens, there's just going to be more and more squeezing. Customers are going to pay more, drivers are going to make less, and these billion-dollar companies are just going to get richer and richer.
Exactly. And it reminds me of, I was just in London a couple months ago, and I took a long Uber ride from London to the airport. It was like an hour and a half ride. It was nuts. I forget why. But anyway, so I had a chance to talk to the driver, and it's really interesting because we've talked about this before, especially with some regulations and protections for drivers in Europe versus here. And when I was explaining to him how it is in America, he couldn't believe it. I mean, his exact words were, "Well, how do they survive?" And I said, "Well, they don't." Because he was talking about they have sick pay and time off, and if something happens, there's compensation for it, and this guaranteed basically a wage, and it's amazing. And we're seeing what happened in New York, which is the negative side where they lost the battle, but there are some wins here, and I actually want to head over into Thursday, which it's there's a win coming, I think, and it's good news. So this is about Minnesota. So the Minnesota City Council is joining forces with Uber and Lyft drivers. Now this is from Star Tribune. They reported, quote, standing alongside dozens of organized Uber and Lyft drivers, a group of council members Thursday pledged to push for what they billed as, quote, some of the strongest protections for rideshare workers in the country. The council members offered a few details, but said they'll begin drafting an ordinance that would provide baseline requirements for drivers' wages and benefits, which includes unemployment insurance and medical or workers' compensation programs. So really good news. It's great to see that council members are teaming up with Uber drivers. They're not an afterthought in Minnesota. Really happy.
Well, it gives hope to the movement. And ultimately, I think this is going to be done on a small scale. We need local governments to step up and provide benefits to their workers and their communities. And community by community will be able to guarantee protections. And if the Minneapolis can do it, then why can't Detroit do it? And why can't Chicago do it? And why can't Des Moines do it? And eventually you have a whole region. And as it grows, as we get more council members in various cities to stand by workers, I think it puts pressure on the state government then, and then the federal government. So it's going to be a long road, and we've seen it's a long road, but stories like this one give me hope and optimism as to where we're headed in the future.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Brian. I think the idea of the small wins could lead to big wins. So if there's small wins in, like you said, Minnesota, Iowa, smaller places, then that could become its own alliance of the Midwest, or even with the bigger cities like Chicago or New York can look at that and go, okay, now we have a framework and we can work around that. And now I could be mistaken here because they don't mention it specifically, but they said dozens of organized Uber and Lyft drivers in Minnesota. I'm almost positive that's MOLDA. Now that's an organization, a gig worker or driver Uber and Lyft organization specifically in Minnesota. So if anyone's listening who's part of that organization, please confirm that that's the case. But we had recently just talked to them, and we know that they were doing big things, and they had a really tight group of drivers. So it's great that the council members are joining them and saying, hey, let's make this work. It's a win-win.
And it shows the power of collective bargaining in a sense. These are not formal unions, but they're groups of drivers with common interests and who are willing to fight together. These companies, these Ubers, Lyfts, Instacarts, they work really hard to separate workers, to make workers, feel autonomous and alone. When these workers can get together and make their voice louder collectively, things get done. And this is just an example of that.
Yeah, which is, as always, as we love to see, love that it's moving forward. We're going to head to Friday. Instacart pays up. Now, this is from Engadget. They explain that Instacart will pay workers $5.1 million as part of a settlement after it allegedly failed to provide some benefits. The company, which has not admitted any wrongdoing, will pay an additional $150,000 to cover the city's legal costs and pay for a settlement administrator to distribute the funds. So basically, people who worked as an independent contractor for Instacart between February of 2017 and December of 2020 are eligible for payments based on how many hours they worked. So San Francisco estimates that between 6,000 and 7,000 people are affected by the settlement. And then, of course, after December 15th, Instacart workers were subject to Prop 22. So this is that space in between. I think it's pretty ironic, Brian. It kind of is kind of shows what happens when you have protections in place pre-Prop 22.
Yeah. So wait, you're telling me that a gig company tried to screw its workers? Is that
Shocker, right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Wait, I'm blown away.
Yeah.
No, this is just. I think it's exactly what you just said. Protections really matter, and when the companies are required to pay up and to protect workers, and provide certain levels of benefits that every worker in our country should have. It's a good thing. And I'm glad that they're being held accountable, and I'm glad that the money's eventually getting where it needs to go. I think there's probably a lot of workers out there who could have used it in real time, but I guess late is better than never. And hopefully this sends a message to gig companies nationwide that you got to follow the law. You've got to provide, the benefits that are required to your workers, and there's going to be consequences if you don't.
I could be wrong here, but I think this is the clearest, most transparent example of a company having to pay, its fair share to drivers versus them creating a law where they don't have to pay anything. I mean, it could not be more black and white than literally saying, okay, before this Prop 22 was created by us, we owed drivers way more money. I think that's crazy to me how clear it is.
Yeah, it is. It's cut and dry, and it's just obvious that they screwed over the worker, and now they're paying the price. So, I certainly, like I said before, we would have liked to see these payments in real time, because that's when drivers really need them. But, accountability is important, and it serves as a deterrent to future bad actors. So this is good. This is a good story, and hopefully furthers our cause.
Totally agree. All right, well, that's the end of this week. Brian, I'll give you the floor as always before we sign off.
Yeah, as always, we just want to invite our listeners to reach out to us for any assistance that they may need after an accident or injury. LegalRideshare is the first law firm in the United States that's entirely dedicated to Uber, Lyft, and gig-related accident and injury claims. Consultations are always free, meaning it doesn't cost anything to talk to me. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Sooner is better than later. We want to give you the information you need to arm yourself to make the best out of any unfortunate situation.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And that is the end of This Week in Rideshare. See you next week.